Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. One of the most frequent questions I get from viewers is regarding the reels that I use, and specifically the side of the reel that the handle's on. Meaning, I get a lot of comments from people asking about why some reels I'm using have a left-handed reel and others have a right-handed reel. And it's really interesting to me because the comments I get are all over the place. Some people just want to know why I use two different types of reel and is there an advantage to it? And other people will leave comments on videos that are to the point of, hey, this guy switches hands with his reels after the cast. I'm turning the video off because I'm not interested because he clearly doesn't know what he's doing. I think that's a pretty entertaining one that I get because if you go back and watch some of the retrieve videos I've done, generally speaking, I just grab a bait, tie it on the rod that I've got, and because I've got both left and right-handed reels, I'm not that interested in which one I grabbed. But oftentimes when I'm doing a retrieval video, I will have one that is a left or right-handed reel, and therefore I need to swap hands after I make a cast if I use my other hand with it. And the comments are just sometimes off the wall crazy when it comes to, hey, this guy is not even worth listening to because he switches hands. Well, I got to tell you guys, for me, the reason I started using a left-handed reel was because I do a lot of flipping, and after I'm flipping, I didn't want to switch hands. Well, just because I find that to be beneficial doesn't mean it's necessarily the only way to do it, to the point where a lot of the best flippers out there switch hands after making the flip. So if you're an angler out there who's watching who says there's no credibility to this person because they don't switch hands, you might want to go look at some of the top anglers out there to see if they're doing it, because a lot of anglers, even though I disagree with it, are actually switching hands from their casting hand to their reeling hand. And to me, that is at times an inefficiency. But it's entertaining to me the number of questions and comments I get regarding it, because it really is something that is brought up quite a bit, and I do feel like can be impactful to your fishing performance. So let me talk a little bit about the reels that I'm using in terms of right or left-handed. So I started off, I'm a predominantly right-handed person. I started off like a lot of us who then used a right-handed bait cast reel. So you make the cast, you switch the hand, and you start reeling. And what I found, because I started doing a lot of flipping, a lot of close quarter, shallow water flipping, is every once in a while, after I flipped, I'd go to switch hands, and as I'm switching hands, I'd get bit, and therefore I would then have to set the hook, and that could potentially lead to a missed hook set if I was slow. Sometimes in the hurry, I would miss the reel handle, and it would just potentially lead to something that wasn't that could be an error while fishing. More importantly, though, what I found was that switching of the reel was slowing me up dramatically. By going to a left-handed reel, this reel never left my right hand. So generally speaking, I flip right-handed. I can flip both left and right-handed. If I have my choice, I'm a little bit better with my right hand. Therefore, I would flip and just engage the reel. Flip, engage the reel. And I could go much faster. I'd make more pitches throughout the day by not having to switch the reel into my off hand. So that's the primary reason why I started doing it. Now, because I had taught myself using a right-handed bait caster, what I found was I could use both, and I enjoyed using both. So generally speaking, if you look at the deck of my boat, a lot of times, at least to start the day, it doesn't end the day this way, but I'll have left-handed reels on one side, right-handed reels on another side, because they line up better when they're on the deck of the boat, and therefore they are it's a little bit cleaner and they're not piled up on top of each other. But really what it came down to was I started using the left-handed reels for all of my flipping, all of my Texas rigs, all my jigs, anything where I could potentially be flipping and pitching a bait. And most of my casting baits, so things that you would use like say a topwater bait or a crankbait, or a vibrating jig, things where I'm really making long casts, what I find is I'm switching the reel to my offhand while the bait's still in midair a lot of times. So there's not a real big consistency, but I think it's important for me to be able to use both right and left-handed reels. And there's a couple of reasons to that. One is because if I were to get injured, I could use the other hand to both cast and reel if needed. So if there was an issue, say with my right hand, I could go switch the bait over to my left and still potentially be able to reel. So as a professional, somebody who makes my career this way, I have to think about things like that. Because if I miss a tournament because I'm not able to reel with a certain hand, that's going to potentially cost me an entire season. So I do it from the standpoint of potential risk from an injury. I do it because I also feel like it could prevent injury in the future, meaning if I'm always using one hand to do something, that could potentially lead to more wear and tear on those muscles or that part of my body, which could lead to potential injury. I don't have any scientific proof to that other than the fact that I know a lot of repetitive motion over time can cause injury. So if there's times I can cast with my right hand, cast with my left hand, reel with my left hand, reel with my right hand, I do feel like I'm going to potentially prevent injury. And at the same time, I'm just conditioning both hands, allowing myself the capability to do it in the future. And then other than that, one of the biggest factors that a lot of people don't recognize is the ability to work the same bait from different sides of the boat. So there's a lot of times where if I'm going down a bank, let's say I'm on a really good swim jig bite. If I'm going down a bank where I've got the shoreline to my left and I'm paralleling it and I'm making casts, I like to be able to pull into or along the shoreline, let's say. If I have, so to do that, I need a left-handed reel. So if I've got a left-handed reel, I make a cast, shoreline's here, bait lands, I'm paralleling it, I can set the hook this way. If I were using a right-handed reel in that case, I almost either have a weaker hook set trying to go across my body, or I would want to come to my natural side over my right shoulder, but then that's kind of an odd way to go from having my bait down here to switching it over to set the hook. So if I'm on a really good bite in that instance, I'll actually have two rods rigged, both a left-handed and a right-handed. So if the shoreline is on my left, I can reel it with my rod tip pointing to the shoreline with a left-handed reel. And then if the next shoreline I go to, the shoreline's on the right, I can reel so that my rod is still pointed at the shoreline and I can still set easily over the natural shoulder. So I do think there's a lot of benefits there. Ultimately, what I will say is even though I think there's efficiencies, it doesn't mean that that's something that's going to make and break you as an angler. So to comment and make statements like, well, just because you don't use the same reel handle that I think you should be, makes you an inadequate fisherman is kind of ridiculous to me. But a lot of people have made that comment. But I do think there is a lot of value to being able to use both left and right-handed reels. At this point, when I first started, it was difficult to find left-handed bait casters. At this point, most bait casters come in a left and right-handed version. And from that standpoint, they're a lot easier to find, but they really can be beneficial to you. Hopefully this answers the question that I get routinely of why do I have both a left and right-handed bait caster? Like, what's the point to that? And it's really personal preference. I do think there's some efficiencies, but it's not something that will change your fishing drastically. So hopefully this answers the questions. If it did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.